You're listening to your number one radio station.
This is the Cannabis Community Project. Oh, yay.
Open up, Colorado. It's 420. Time to grind and burn.
This is not your son's stoner show.
Welcome to the Cannabis Community Project. Broadcasting from the Dank Studios, it's the Grind and Burn Show, high up in Denver, Colorado at 3835 Elm Street. Here's your host, Brainstorm. Looking for some cannabis products this year? 2017 is going to be the boom year for products. Find all the best ones on our website at the Cannabis Community Store, www.cannabiscommunitystore. We have all the products from Cushly to Herb Box, Canna Relief, and everything else cannabis related. As my great-grandpappy taught me, always check the knobs first. It's a sign of a busy man, right? It's just probably Pokemon Go, right?
It is
about
actually
update. So I'm just going to assume you don't really know what this is all about or what I'm doing or anything else. I'm going to assume you're just thrown in at the last second. Let me just explain to you. I run the Cannabis Community Project, which is a network of podcasts all about cannabis. I do a show every week called The Grind and Burn, which is kind of focused on the entrepreneurs and business people functioning in the industry, learning about their backstory and how they operate in the industry and how the industry thrives based on the individuals involved in business and entrepreneurship, blah, blah, blah. So as I tagline it, not your son's stoner show, because we don't really talk a lot about stoner type stuff. It's more about who you are in the sense of how you got into this industry, what do you do in the industry, some maybe inner workings if you have a specific job or something you do, and then your foresights on the future. And more or less that lasts about 30 minutes. And then I'll put some intro music and outro music to it, put a little intro. And if you ever get a chance, go to the website, cannabiscommunityproject.com, listen to a few shows. You'll know exactly how this one will turn out once it's all edited. It'll turn out to be like a 45-minute to an hour segmented long show with various segments and intros and voiceovers and music and everything else. This is one piece of it right here. This is not an expose. I'm not here to get you on anything. Just here to learn about you. The real goal of what I'm doing or what I would like to do is to have other people that listen maybe get inspired to learn how to actually get involved in the industry in a legitimate way and get employed, or how to just navigate something specifically. And by maybe hearing your story of how you came from wherever you came from and got involved in this industry, somebody else will hear that story and go, oh, well, maybe now it's time to quit my data entry job and, take the lunge forward into the industry. So that's the real goal of what my show is trying to accomplish. But by all means, have fun with it. So if you need to tell me a crazy stoner story, feel free to do that too. Maybe you can give me an intro, who you are, what your title is, and then if you have just like a general comment to say, or if not, I can just go straight into a question. We can have a nice, natural, organic conversation that will spontaneously end right about 37 minutes.
All right. Cool.
But whenever you are ready, and you can do as many times as you want, because that's the beauty of recording, of not being live. So if you do something wrong, accidentally say the wrong name or something, forget who you are, just say it again.
All right. Sounds good.
Well, I feel like I already know him. Yes, I feel like I already know him. He's been shuffling round me all my I just can't change my ways. Well, he's burning out my light bulb, but he's keeping it warm in here. He's been shuffling around me all my days. Now I just can't keep away, no, can't keep away. Well, he curved the wall around me. Yes, he's curved the burning stove. He's been shuffling around me all my days. Now I just can't keep away, no, can't keep away, no, no. Well, fix my sins, my sins. It's a dirty roll of tricks, where you never get satisfied. You never get a thing you miss. No, no, no.
All right. Well, I'm Matthew McKenzie, and I've worked for Dank for some odd years now, going on about 4 or so. And I first came into contact through a friend, and he had mentioned that there was a new spot available over at Dank. And at the time, I was just kind of working from job to job, any sort of thing from like being a delivery driver to working in the restaurant industry. And was kind of jaded for the amount of work you had to put into those types of menial jobs. And buddy's like, hey, if you get a badge, we can make something happen. And so I went down and picked up my badge and came in for an interview, and I met with one of the owners here. His name's Justin Jones, and we had a quick little talk, and he was like, yeah, man, it'd be great to have you. We're a little stocked right now, but we'll give you a call soon. And I remember being like, wow, man, really hope I get a job there because I just got this license. Dang. And sure enough, it came together pretty quickly afterwards, and started learning the ins and outs from the back side of the industry first. That was my intro, was actually coming in and learning how to grow and, you know, doing all the basic tasks like cleaning, trimming, pruning, staking, trellising, any sort of thing along those lines. I was getting my feet wet in, and quickly noticed I was making a lot better money for the amount of work I was doing, and actually doing work that was fun. Like I was having a good time and learning all sorts of stuff that would transcend into other things that would, you know, spark my interest, like just growing things in general, like my knowledge of how to prune things or like be cognizant of a plant's needs and wants. You know, the marijuana plant works just like almost any other plant in, you know, how it strives to photosynthesize and grow and expand. So it's kind of interesting to have that knowledge and then go back into your own garden at home and be like, man, this is the same thing almost. I can just I guess, put both together in the same world.
Okay. And then you didn't say what your current title is.
Oh, current title is Budtender.
Budtender. Okay. Is there like a level like Budtender 1, Budtender 2, Budtender 3?
Pretty much what it seems like in the industry is that a Budtender will stick around for a while until they seem to be like self-managed, and either they move up to the point of becoming a manager and go on salary, or they stay up front working for those tips.
It's like when years ago, I used to work for Wells Fargo Bank, and I got hired on the cash vault, and I was a utility clerk 1. And then 6 months later, I got promoted to utility clerk 2. And my goal was to get to 3, but I quit before I got there.
How far do they go up?
Well, only tell 3, and then you have to get some other type of job, I guess.
I see.
But I'm always fascinated with titles of positions. So Budtender, so you're working behind the counter, dealing with customers, shelling out buds. Are you a full user and consumer of the plant itself, and this is how your experience of the job has come, or were you hired on and then trained how to handle and sling the plant to customers?
Definitely helped having experience in the past with the product itself, but it is kind of funny. A lot of people's journeys would probably be pretty similar to mine in that they didn't necessarily maybe have a ton of experience going into it, and they learned pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But for people starting up the business, you certainly want those people who have got a lot of experience in this industry.
Right.
So
I mean, there's been a lot of new terminology and vocabulary over just the last 5 to 8 years of the industry, the public having to really learn how to interact with this industry, how to learn words like indica and sativa, and how to approach plants and pretend like you understand what you're talking about when you're ordering your products from the shelf, and give that meaningful nod as you're talking to your Budtender, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's all these things that really, I think everybody, including the industry itself, has had to really educate on, is that it's no longer just, in the backseat of somebody's car getting your wound up baggie. You're now having to figure out how to interact with the industry. So the term Budtender itself, that was tongue in cheek for a long time, and now it's just what it is. And it's who you are. Where did you come from prior to 3.5 years ago?
So I was in college when I started this job, and I was getting pretty close to finishing up.
What degree?
English degree with a writing concentration, and a minor in studio art with an emphasis in photography.
Wow.
Yeah, so
I see how that relates.
Yeah, it totally relates in the sense of that weed has always been a counterculture thing. It has been heavily associated with artistic creativity and seems to be an accomplice to that.
Right.
So that would be my introduction to it, is the enjoyment of mixing art with marijuana and letting your creative juices flow. And that was like my start into weed, was kind of getting that creative spark from it. And when I got an opportunity to work a job in it, I was certainly interested, no doubt.
Well, when you were in school pursuing this degree, you weren't thinking about joining a dispensary.
No.
So what was the image in your mind of how you were imagining your life kind of leaving school and being, what was it?
I'll put it to you this way. At that time, I wanted to travel really, really bad, and I wanted, good money to do it. And, with the type of jobs that were out there that were really normalized, you were busting your ass off to make less than what you could make growing weed, because it's pretty high demand here in Colorado. So my real goal was to make a lot of money and then just travel the world for a bit, which I did. I went to Southeast Asia.
Travel, Jack Kerouac on the road. You were just out.
Hey, he's a
getting
big
drunk.
Yeah, rambling around.
Right. I can see it. I mean, I still would like to do that, if life ever allows me to, in some form or another, minus the alcohol, but, in that same spirit of things. And I'm not much of a writer, but I could pretend like I am living that lifestyle. I'd meet people at bars and pretend like I was engaging in a life. Yeah, I think it's the fantasy of freedom, right?
Yeah.
It's the fantasy of freedom, of being kind of on your own and engaging life and out there and kind of pursuing life.
Exactly. And this kind of job really fostered that sort of attitude. And what was really nice about it too was, like I've said, I've been off and on with Dank because I've maintained a really good relationship with them, and they have like a real family type atmosphere here where you're able to do something like, hey, I'm going to Southeast Asia for 6 months and I hope we're all cool. And I came back, and sure enough, since we left on good terms, they said, Matt, we would love to have you back. And they took me right on board.
Well, I mean, a good employer should recognize a good employee and should recognize reasons of leaving. I think traveling the world is legitimate. It's not like you said I have to go to prison for a few years. Will you accept my application upon release? And, you want to travel the world and pursue something. Yeah. So do you still feel like you are in the pursuit of that, working here, like you have that freedom to still engage in your art and your writing? And
Certainly.
You also said you're a musician, so you're still engaged in art. Where does bud tending interact in that? Is it consume your life?
No, definitely not. And I think that's why I enjoy doing it, is because it really goes on along the lines of what you were saying. It's a job that allows me to have like freedom in life. And I don't go home any day like really pissed off ever. Right. And I can't say there's a lot of other jobs. Yeah. Of course, you have your bad days at any job, but in this type of industry, there are a lot.
Would that be client-induced or management-induced?
Never really management. We're dialing things in together. That's what's really cool about this industry. There's a lot of moments where people at the bottom of the totem pole and the top are actually like coming together and trying to solve issues. And everyone's opinions are taken seriously. It's usually maybe, as a lot of bud tenders, they get disenchanted with the mundane questions of explaining to adults. Put on your grown-up pants and don't be a champ and eat the whole chocolate bar. Start off slow, and some people want answers that you can't really give answers to sometimes.
Well, I mean, you actually bring up a good point, and it's a point that probably most people are wondering. They have questions about, and I don't know how many bud tenders get the chance to really give the inside scoop of what are the crazy stories out there of the clients. And so, but give us some insight. Walk us through a typical day of what it means to be employed as a bud tender. Tell us from the time you come in. Do you clock in? Do you pencil in? Do you just tap your cap and say, hey, I'm here? Walk us through a day.
Yeah. We got a digital time clock. So you go right up into that and press it like an iPad and keep track of your hours that way. But when we show up, it's typically around 7:45. We open up a little bit earlier than a lot of shops around town. We're ready to go by 8.
What does the law allow for opening?
I believe it's 8 o'clock.
The earliest.
In Denver. Now I can't speak for
med, rec, both.
No, for the medical side, it opens up at 10 o'clock.
Okay, so Denver allows 8 for rec and 10 for medical. Okay, so you're here just a few minutes prior to that, so there's no real setup or anything you have to engage in prior to opening doors?
A little bit. It's pretty fast. We actually used to have a half hour back in the day, and then we realized we were kind of twiddling our thumbs for about 15 minutes after setting up and realized we could just get it together in that short amount of time. But it's really a matter of just like setting up the displays, taking all the product from all the safe spots into viewing spots.
And I can tell you as a non-morning person, 15 minutes is a big deal when you're hitting that snooze bar.
Hell yeah, it is. We were all very happy about that.
If you're twiddling your thumbs for 15 minutes at 7:30 in the morning, you compare that against your hourly wage, and all of a sudden your sleep becomes more valuable. At least to me.
15.
Exactly.
I'll take the snooze.
So you come in, you open shelves, you make sure place hasn't been robbed, you make sure product's still there, everything's turned on. People immediately start coming in the morning. Is it like a liquor store where you have a line of the late night winos waiting outside?
A little bit. We almost always have someone waiting.
Wow.
Typically, yeah. It's almost more rare if someone's not here right when we open the doors. But yeah, it's really funny because oftentimes you're sitting there, you're like, man, these are some motivated stoners. Like, Jesus, just waiting 15 minutes like before we're even ready. And then sometimes you'll realize you're like, oh, this person works like the night shift, and you'll talk to them and they'll say, what's the heaviest Cynic you got? I'm trying to get knocked out right now. And you're like, dude, it's 8 o'clock. Like, what? And then you're like, man, oh, you work. Like, gotcha. And
Yeah.
then, so there's a good amount of those individuals that come bright and early. It makes perfect sense. Like they're looking for that nightcap right when the sun's coming up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is the day pretty much just a nonstop stream of behind the counter customers in or out, or are you also engaging in other non-bud tending type activities?
Yeah, definitely have little like side tasks. We do tons of like the labeling. Like that's like a huge little side job of a bud tender is making sure you get your barcodes and information on there correctly. Other than that, as far as like the actual volume, it's very rush based, it seems. And you're dealing sometimes with big groups. Bachelor parties are huge, bachelorette parties, and general tourism for things like, the ski industry, which is huge, obviously, here in Colorado.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get your moments where it's a little bit slow, but it seems to be more steady and rush-based. And it's actually, a lot of people wonder, like, when are you the most busy? And it's funny. It's just like any other industry. You got your morning rush, you got your lunch rush, and then the 5 o'clock when everyone gets off and they need their weed.
Ironically, it's the same when I worked at McDonald's.
Yeah, right?
Is the question of what are some of the stupidest things you've heard already burnt out of what people already know about? Has that already been talked
I would
about?
love to talk about this.
Give us just some of the the top ones of what are stupid customers, and we assume they're all out of staters, right?
Roughly,
Okay.
but even every once in a while you'll have an in-stater. You're like, did you really say that in here? You know better.
I usually I'm in here on Friday afternoons, and it's funny just as I'm waiting for the door to be open, watching customers come out with their cheese-eating grins, and they're like in a haze of a world, kind of stumbling around, and you can tell the outer staters are just even more kind of just lost in this almost fictitious world. They're coming out of the dispensary, and I had a guy just shake my hand randomly because he was just so happy. He was just bubbling, and it's funny, and it's glad that the industry can bring so much joy just from its presence, let alone the consumption of. But what were you going to say about what should we call it? Like our top 10 stupidest?
The do nots and the
I'll
do's.
come up with some good catchphrase, like a good David Letterman type, top 10 list.
Yeah, it's like a really new experience for a lot of people, so you got a lot of questions, and that's to be expected. But on the bud tenders end of the spectrum, we want you to kind of think on kind of our perspective, because we totally want to get you great product, and we want to have a good conversation with you and inform you. But right off the bat, we don't want to talk about illegal things. Let's, and if you do want to talk about them, really think about that question and ask it if it's appropriate. I mean, one of the biggest ones is, how do I get this back home? And that is just not a good question. Just don't ask your bud tender that question, because actually, technically, he should probably kick you out of the shop at that point.
Right, because he already knows you're engaging in illegal activity.
Exactly.
He can't sell to you now.
So don't talk about, taking it out of state, because it's flat out illegal. Even if it's from a legal state to another, there's a bunch of airspace in between here and there. And so it's still illegal.
Maybe if I can just insert, as a joke, right? If we put a bowl of condoms on the counter and put a little sign that says, before you ask your bud tender, how do you get this back home? Just help yourself to a free condom and figure it out yourself, right? And then we don't need to say more, so please continue.
Another one. Let's see. There's a good list of them.
What's the most common type questions there? Maybe not necessarily the most ridiculous, but obviously people want to know sativa indica stuff, right? So they're probably constantly asking you about pain and sleep and what's good for this, what's good for that. So I would assume the number one question you're getting is based around just specifically, what do you recommend, right? And then from that, how do you handle those situations? Do you have a centralized training that you've all been trained to proceed a list of questions, or how to handle customers as they're asking questions? Do you just individually have your own styles of how you interact with customers?
Totally. Everyone's got their own approach. And when it comes to those difficult questions, you only get so many strikes too. And I just saw the two other big ones I want to mention while I've got the airspace in front of me to help all the other bud tenders. Don't talk about minors either, or people that aren't with you, that you're like, hey, I want to get this to my buddy. You don't need to bring him in the conversation necessarily, because we don't know. There's a lot of situations where we have to assume nothing everything about you.
Right.
And just play by the law and reiterate the law. And we have to be totally transparent. So even if you want to ask a budtender, what do I really do to, break the law? They're still not going to give you the answer because we don't know if you're an undercover or not.
And you are being filmed.
Yep. And there are undercovers who go and ask all these questions to us and try to get the right answer out of us, which is the wrong one.
Right. I mean, it would be different like if you were talking to a budtender, I don't know, like on a podcast outside of his job and you asked him like, hey, what would I do if I was this? But if you're actually standing behind the counter, you almost have to treat them like they're kind of an undercover cop in a sense.
Yeah.
They're working for the state. They're licensed by the state. They're obligated to disclose certain information if given that information. In a sense, you're kind of a de facto undercover cop working within a dispensary. How do you feel about that?
Tell me how you really feel.
And then you said you had two more. So what was the other one, the other big one?
One of the other big ones, too, is like, just show us your license. A lot of places will ask for it twice, and we're just trying to ensure that we don't make mistakes.
Oh, people just getting snappy about,
people get
I just
real
showed it to the
snappy.
guy outside. kind of thing.
How many times can you see this is worse than the airport? This is worse than TSA. I want to ask you a question. Do you think I absolutely love checking IDs all day? If I didn't have to, that'd be great. But
like you get paid a commission every time you check an ID or something.
And along lines with that, what a lot of people think is ridiculous is like, come on, man, Sonny, I've been smoking weed longer than you've been alive. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that one.
Right.
But a part of me also wants to be like, well, I do tell them sometimes that even if it's expired, I can get in a lot of trouble.
Right.
And that's one of the main things we're looking for when you got no hair on your head. I already know you're old enough.
It's the Willie Nelson scene from, what was the movie with Jim Brewer and Dave Chappelle? Half Baked, right? When he's sitting with Willie Nelson on the porch. I remember when the dime bag used to cost, that whole thing. Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of old timers who constantly want to condescend. I've been just tell them not this weed. I've been smoking this weed since before I was born.
That's Malcolm Polka Gold. Yeah, man. Oh, we talk about Thai stick a lot. Oh yeah,
right. All the stuff from Cheech and Chong albums. In the realm of compliance, you had to get badged. So to be a budtender, do you have to have a key or a support badge?
You have to just have a support badge.
Just a support badge because you're a non-managerial or key functioning type figure. But as far as that, do you have to have any additional training or compliance from an industry standpoint to be a budtender?
No, but you will be a little bit more desirable if you have taken some sort of background classes. Like one I did was I Comply.
Explain what that is.
It was pretty much just a compliancy program that their whole goal is just to inform every budtender that they can and, manager just the ins and outs of how to do the job without making mistakes and keeping it all legitimate.
So a general compliance class for the industry. How did you acquire that information?
Dank actually paid for it.
Oh,
okay. They just wanted us to be informed just so they could say their staff has gone through the rigmarole of
smart employer.
Yeah. Certainly. And it was a big help to all of us. Like when you take just one of those classes, you can walk away and be like, all right, I heard the rundown. There's not the gray area of like, what about this? And you still run into those, but nonetheless, you got plenty of people to talk about it here.
Right. Well, that's the upside of regulation. As much as those shall complain about regulation and intrusion and cost and making people do stuff, the upside is people actually learn stuff by being, forced to learn about compliance. You actually learn something, and then it makes your job better, and it makes the industry better all around. So it's a win-win on that one. Does the facility to be a budtender require any specific skills from you? So from an industry, no, but it helps to have like an I Comply or some other type of course. And I assume these are like weekend courses or week-long, hour-long?
Mine was like a 2-session thing. It was pretty quick, and we were on the clock. It was just another day of work, and we did it in shifts where like half the staff was on working, and then we swapped them out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in and out. So does Dank require you to have any special knowledge or skills? Did you have to prove to them that to be a budtender, you knew the plant, like you had a symbiosis going on with the plant, and you knew you could rattle off strains, from memory, and you knew how much THC percentage this strain? I mean, did you have to do any personal proof of competence to be employed?
Well, for me, it's a little different because when I made the transfer over to a budtender, I had already been than working in a grow, which was our grow at the time. Because I've worked for a couple dispensaries, and that made the transition into being a budtender very easy because I've grown weed, so I understand it to some degree. When you're trying to dive straight into the budtender position, it certainly helps to have your background knowledge on like kind of even what the landrace strains are, where all this weed comes from, like, you know, who's done the crossing, the legality too. Like, it's been this ever evolving thing. So doing your own personal research is just hugely helpful. Cause a lot of people like to come in with a resume that says, hey, bud, I smoke a lot of weed. Hire me. And it's not what we're looking for. Really.
Right. Unless there's a job for a weed consumer, do you need to hire somebody that needs to just smoke weed? Cause I want to apply
Those
for
are
that
your
job.
budtenders.
Oh, damn. Okay, so it helps to know this, but does that information actually translate to the customer? Are customers coming in and inquiring this type of knowledge from their budtender about the grows and the details of how things are grown and all that? What are the customers actually looking for?
So I would say the majority of them are basically at the basics of like, hey, like, is it a sativa or an indica? And they're kind of wondering those intro questions. But then you have like the whole echelon of people who, you know, they want to know what nutrients you're using or like what, you know, solvents were used to extract this, and a lot of intricate questions upon infusions. And
do you find they're asking you this to challenge you, or because they're genuinely trying to just smoke a better product and they want to know if you're up on your game of growing?
I don't know, maybe I'm a little biased, but some of those guys, I would say the majority of the ones who come through really hammering questions at you just want to show you that they smoke more weed than you.
Yeah.
And they know more weed.
Yeah.
More weed questions and answers than you might be able to.
Because they still just buy the cheapest stuff anyway.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Right. That's what ends up happening. Like, really? Yeah. No, but you got a lot of great people who have awesome questions. They really want to know for their own personal benefit. And there's people who have like certain conditions where they have to be cognizant of what they consume. Like, and that really plays out in the edibles, especially. I totally support and understand why people have a lot of questions for the edibles themselves when it comes down to not being able to, like, you know, consume nuts, for instance, or something like that.
Right, and dairy and other types of issues, health issues. Do you find yourself engaging with people individually based on how you sense they are? Yeah, you don't have just a set interaction. Depending on who they are, you will engage with people individually different. Some people, if they're there just to buy, you engage with them like a retailer. You know, what do you want? Here's the price. Thank you. Goodbye. Other people, if they're looking for some actual information and advice on pain, you'll take time with them or medical stuff. Is that also a personal thing, or is this something from a company training standpoint?
You get a pretty good sense of it pretty quick, I would say. For starters, when I see someone walking around with googly eyes, like right when they come in, it's pretty obvious they're not from here. If you're wide-eyed and you can't like focus on a single thing, that surefire sign. I'm like, oh, you're a tourist. That's easy, because you know local Coloradans, they're just walking straight up to the counter and they're asking 2 words like indica or sativa, that one, and like that's how they
want the
order.
retail experience.
Yeah, they want to get in and out. Whereas some people want to come in here and just pull up a chair and just talk about weed, and then at some point you're like, hey, I gotta line out the door, bud.
Right,
we gotta get this going.
You need a lounge, a dank lounge.
Wish we had one.
Yeah, for the new, well, kind of.
Yeah, right here, right.
You know, but again, to the question of, is this a training thing, or is this just you as an individual engaging with customers like this?
Definitely not so much a training thing, because when you get the sense for somebody, you can cut a lot of the BS and go straight to, you know, like the meat of maybe what they're trying to get to.
Yeah.
You know, I do give like an overall spiel that I have ready for everybody, and I don't give that to anybody. And that's just like the lay of the land, because most people are just trying to focus on one thing. And it's kind of like a lot to take in for people. And I totally understand, especially if it's like your first time.
Right.
But it's kind of like basic things. My spiel will like usually start with like, hey, there's our menu. And people are like, whoa, you have a menu. It's like, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can open the jars, give them a whiff, no touchy, you know, those sort of things. And just kind of like let them take it in.
Yeah, almost need, like, what's that restaurant, the Italian restaurant, IPPO or something, where you come in, they ask you, have you ever been here before? And if you've never been there, the first thing they do is they take you on the grand tour. They take you through the kitchen, then they take you through the back, and they give you a grand tour if it's your first time, because the restaurant itself is kind of so overwhelming that they don't want to hold you up with the reoccurs that come in. So they almost have two lines. Have you been here before, or is this your first time? If you've been here before, then it's just straight to, here's your table, let's get you seated. If this is your first time, then they take you on a whole tour, and it's a whole different thing. And, maybe there's a setup that needs to be done there for first timers.
Oh, yeah. I know the first timers want a tour of the grow oftentimes.
Yeah.
We would be giving tours all day if that was the case.
Just make the wall translucent.
Hey, some people got a nice little glass. You can just peer right into their grow.
So going to the opposite extreme of this, then, have there ever been an angry customer? Why? Why would somebody get angry?
For some of those things I brought up earlier, like hell, old timers showing their ID. I've had plenty get real mad just from me asking for their ID. Also, even when you tell people, and they'll get a little flustered when you're telling them like, hey, you can't be talking about taking this out of state. And they'll be like, well, why not? And they'll get all upset real quick. And it's like, hey, because that's illegal. But, like any other place, you're going to get crazies through the door. That's just life in general, and you got people that got chips on their shoulder, Oh yeah, over the phone I've had a couple people that are real crazy. We got prank phone callers too.
So leading into that, what is the security issue? Because this is kind of a elephant in the room, right? Within the industry, there's been a few incidences, and with all incidences, it makes people question, am I safe? As a budtender, do you feel safe in your industry, in your environment? When we hear about things happening, isolated events happening, how does that reflect on what you do?
I definitely feel safe, especially because, like most companies, like Dank has a policy where the human life's going to come first. Like, we're taught like any other place, like give up the register. We value your life a lot more than, some paperbacks. I think you got to be pretty ballsy to hold up a dispensary, even though that did happen. But, we do little things. We walk our ladies out to the car at night, because chivalry is not dead.
Ladies.
But, it seems pretty safe, and I think a big part of that's because the weed itself, is a very calming thing for a lot of people.
So after you walk the ladies out, who walks you guys to your car?
We make that trudge on our own.
I guess there's only so much you can do with any business, whether I used to work at a bank, and that was always kind of a question I would have in the back of my mind. Same thing, just...
Oh, but hey, I just remembered, like, to answer your question a little bit more, so, like, I just thought of, like, one time someone got mad, like, little things that are beyond our control. Like, there's little rules, like, when you have your medical paperwork and you don't have the actual card itself, you can only shop till 5 o'clock with this little green card.
That's her first time card, not renewals, which also pisses people off.
Exactly.
That you're going
That's
to renewal
one where
and you
they're
let it lapse. Yeah. I've seen people, as I was saying, as I come in every week, I've watched people continuously. It's surprising. Come up and try to get in without cards. And after a while you go, well, maybe I understand once or twice, but some of these people, it's like, they're just taking shots in the dark, just hoping they'll just stumble right in, because they're literally like, hey, I left my card at home, but can I still come in? Don't you have me in your system or something?
Oh, yeah. And that's another one. When you have to turn someone down because of an ID, like, man, some people lose their shit because they've, built an entire vacation off the whole weed thing, and then they get here and they find out that they can't go to a single one, So do your research. That's what I also want to say to everybody listening out there, like kind of look into it. What are the laws? Like, you can ask your budtender, but kind of having some of your back knowledge won't hurt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least having an ID. I mean, if you don't have a med card, that's one thing, but if you got to have at least an ID.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
Who are these people?
I know.
So what is your vision for the future on, let's start with just the industry and then we'll end with your personal self. So what is your vision for the future of the industry? Where do you think it's going? What do you think will happen over the next year or two?
I think it's going to be a lot more normalized. We had 5 states come forward recently, just getting that legislation a little bit further on down the road, to allow, the medical marijuana or recreational marijuana marijuana to like come on through to the people, because the people want it in those states, especially that are, voting it in. I definitely see it becoming more commonplace and people becoming more accepting of it and really seeing the value in it in itself, whether it's, on the individual basis or from an economic standpoint, because I have that conversation a lot. A lot of people from other states are somewhat jealous in the fact that Colorado is prospering right now. And yeah, we're happy. A lot of us are. It's a good place to live. And, we're not babies out here. We're tired of being told that we're children. We can't have something that, we should be able to have access to. And I think the consciousness is changing in the world big time. I really feel it. And I'm pretty excited for that because weed has been demonized way too long.
Well, those who don't want it to succeed root for its failure. Do you think the new administration will have any impact, good or bad, on the industry?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question because Trump is a wild card, as a lot of people like to refer to him as. So you don't 100% know his intentions all the time. But then again, it's not even necessarily all his decision. That really breaks down statewide, and that's what people got to really keep in mind. And that's why I've been assuring people, like, it's going to stick around for a bit. As I put it to people, too, it would be like the prohibition. Like, if you give people a right and then you take it away, people lose it.
Yeah.
So
it survived the Bush administration when most of these medical laws became solidified in states like California and Colorado. A long time ago, long before the boom of Obama in this whole industry we're living in now, there was a medical industry going on, and it survived some administrations just the same. You ever listen to Freakonomics? You know what that is? The podcast? Or
I heard of it, but I haven't listened to it.
Yeah, for anybody that knows what that is, there's an episode called How Much Does the President Really Matter? And I would encourage you to find that episode on Freakonomics and listen to it, because it puts things in perspective that as much as we like to think the president has a finger in every part of our lives, the reality might be different. This industry, I also agree, is probably not going backwards, regardless of what an attorney general may do or may not do or anything else. I mean, the feds were raiding dispensaries all through the Obama administration. The feds were raiding growers and doing everything on their behalf to try to slow the industry, even while Obama was in office. So it didn't seem to falter there. And I doubt Trump, who I think is pretty agnostic on the issue, he could probably go either way depending on what's in it for him.
Yeah.
kind of deal. So I think with that in mind, I don't think the industry really has much to fear. Let's end it. You personally, where do you go from here as a bud tender? Does the industry provide a real structure in the sense of like a corporate structure, if we thought like an insurance company or a bank, or you worked for ABC Windows and Siding or something? Is there a structure that allows you to grow over the course of a lifelong career with a company, or do you have to pretty much leave one thing to advance yourself? I mean, explain to us how a dispensary is structured in the sense of where promotions come in. Is there job levels? Obviously, there's managers, but within that, is there levels? Is there places to grow and go? What is your personal desire and what is the reality?
So, yeah, like any other job, you can kind of top out at certain positions. To some degree, like any other teller position where you're working a register, there's kind of a max pay for that. Now, where you can really excel, like a bar, we work for tips, and that's a big thing. And a lot of tourists may not even consider that.
I have never, although I do tip, I have never considered it as being a percentage of your pay. I do it because tip, if there's a tip jar, and I also work for tips, and I understand it, but it's never crossed my mind that may be a percentage of your living wage.
And it's actually a big part for bud tenders. So where you can exceed is by giving people like exceptional service, and really actually taking the time to answer questions. Because I have heard kind of a problem in the industry is like the curtness of answering questions, because we get a lot of BS questions, but we also get a lot of good ones. And, some people don't have, patience. So I'd recommend to somebody who wants to be like, like a good bud tender, or to kind of advance themselves, hopefully into a managerial position.
I have to jump in here because we can't move on without thoroughly addressing this issue of the interaction of bud tenders with customers. Before I became a exclusive Dank customer, right? I used to frequent many, many dispensaries. And then I talk to many people, just in the nature of what I do and other stuff. And so the fact that you bring that up, that there is a perception out there that bud tenders can sometimes not be the best customer service or interactive type people. Let's also go a little bit deeper on that, because I've been to many dispensaries and I find that like there's people, right? There's people, but really the dispensary kind of prunes a culture of how their people are. And when you walk in a place, there's some places that are obviously trying to be the hip, cool, dispensaries. And there's other places you walk in, they're trying to be very clean and corporate and very, nice, and everything's modern and updated and everything it's in its place. Or
it looks like a pharmacy.
Right. Or it looks like a pharmacy. You walk in some places and it's kind of dirty and everybody looks kind of hippie-ish. And, it's like every dispensary has a culture where they either hire people that are kind of like them or the people kind of just become like them as they get hired. And again, I'll ask this in the same sense. Is there a training that goes on, and then is there an individual style amongst yourself that you personally try to give off? But is there a corporate anything, forget the word corporate, is there a company-wide either training or just environment that comes down that kind of directs how you should be and act and how you see your counterparts interacting with customers that also affects you? And don't worry, nobody listens to this show, so you can speak freely, I guarantee you. You just heard out in the hall, Jay doesn't even listen. So speak freely. Nobody will hear what the hell you're saying.
Yeah, you got to cultivate your own style and approach. And man, I really like that dirge you went on there. I have noticed the same exact thing. I've walked in those places where you got nothing but dudes in ponytails and you're like, hey man, could I get a joint? And they're like, yeah. And they already grab it. And you're like, which one did you grab? He's like, hybrid. And you're like, hybrid what? Hybrid. Okay. How much is it? $10. And you're like, okay, all right. And then, do you know what it tested at? No. And you're like, how are you in business? Like, this is crazy. Like, right. But yeah, and that's the cultivated, like, we've got the product. You're in the mountains. Take it or leave it.
I'm the dealer.
Yeah.
You're the customer. You want it or not.
Yeah.
Here's the baggie.
Yeah. Like what we do here to cultivate our sort of style, like for instance, a big part of that comes from even just our playlists, our music. Each one of us gets to pick like 3 artists that we want to pick. And, people come in here and they go, damn, like that was some hillbilly bluegrass and now it's like straight up hardcore gangster rap. That was a quick transition and that would actually be really reflective of what we got going on here. But we try to keep in mind all the things that go along with the weed culture. We've got a Bob Marley poster, I can put it to you that way. But we just like to keep it, like pretty mellow. I feel like at Dank it's a little bit more of, it's not like that pharmacy feel. It's a little bit more, I guess, sleek. We don't have that like, I went into one recently that has that like Western barn feel. Everything.
Wow.
It was kind of cool.
Really finding their niche.
I
really.
know. I was like, man, I haven't seen one like this. But yeah, every place has their own sort of style, though. I like that.
Well, I would next time I talk to Jay on the microphone, I'm going to ask him some of these questions if they have an actual customer that they're going after, or if it is just kind of a door open, whoever comes in, comes in. I mean, obviously, if you're making a barn, dispensary, you have a customer in mind, and there's a specific person you're trying to get through that door. Just as if you're, everybody is tie-dye and
and Crocs.
Right, versus anything else. Everybody has long beards and, man buns and, whatever the environment is that you're in, that will be probably the people you attract. So I'm always curious, as you say, it's like, how are you even in business? I'm always curious to what the thought is, not just from the top down, from management. Sometimes there is no thought, sometimes it is like, well, the doors are open, whoever comes in, we'll accept anybody, but we're not really going after anybody. Or there are people who like, we would like this type of person to come in. Do you think about that? Have you been taught anything by your managers of who we would like to bring in?
I'm really happy you brought that up because I want to put this out into the ether. At Dank, we reward nice people. Like, if you're nice to us, you come in and you make our day better, we'll make your day better every single time. Like, and that's just what we go for. And you know what? Also, if you don't ask for a discount, you get a discount here. It's almost like flat. plain and simple. Like if you're that kind of person, if you just come in here with your sorrowful story, begging for a discount, I've heard it, like a lot of other people around town have probably heard your same story.
Right.
And you know what? You'll probably get a discount from me if you just treat me nice, treat me good.
Right.
I'll try to take care of you. But if, your burdens and your problems come on me, it's like, why do I want to hook you up? You're just bitching to me,
Who complains more about price, out-of-towners or locals?
Locals.
Yeah, right. Because an out-of-towner doesn't really know, and they're here already on the bender, right? They're already bought the travel expense. They're already paying for the hotels and the ski trip or whatever. They're already on vacation, so an extra $50 an eighth or more. I don't even know what the prices are anymore, but whatever the high price is already part of that vacation package, whereas a local person who's buying on a weekly basis is probably more in tune to their pricing and what's going on and so forth. But I don't know, is there a split that you know of between local reoccurs versus out-of-towners coming in of what the percentage of business is?
Here at Dank, we keep a good tracking system on that, and we do more business with out-of-towners. It's actually pretty close to 50-50 though, but it leans a little bit more on the tourist end of the spectrum. Okay. And that actually comes by location. Right. Because there's some places that they'll do mostly local business and very little tourist business. Like for starters, I always try to tell people too, and this isn't 100% true, but pretty true that when you're shopping for weed in Denver, you have your pick of the litter. There's so many of these things, so that drives the cost down. And when you get up into the mountains, that's when weed gets real expensive, and you're kind of isolated. And that's one of those situations where we were talking earlier, where they've got you. Yeah. You've got the product, you want it or not.
Right. You're going on your ski trip to Breckenridge or some other little ski town up in the mountains. A couple hours from Denver, you're not going to have, I don't know. I mean, last time I drove through the mountains, it does seem like more and more dispensaries seem to be popping up. But
they're popping up.
Point given, far less than being in the city metropolis of Denver here, where literally almost on every corner.
Yeah, for sure. And, and to go along with what you're, talking about, the pricing, you do have wildly different prices here in Denver. Just a funny little tidbit, an interaction. I have this lady, she came in all flustered, wide-eyed, and just walked straight up to me. She was like, well, I just bought a $15 eighth. And I was like, yeah, I thought she was going to get mad or something. Why aren't your prices that cheap? And I was like, yeah, so was it good? And she was like, it was awful. And I was like, well, it costs $15. That's garbage weed. And she was like, man, I'm never doing that again. And I'm like, well, there you go. Yeah. A lot of people, sometimes think they're getting ripped off when they're paying more for weed. But that's not true. Sometimes it pays to pay a little bit more. You get better weed for sure.
Right. It's like going to the dollar store and complaining because the item you bought just isn't up to quality. It's well, let's move from dollar store and upgrade to Walmart. Yeah, and then from Walmart, we'll upgrade to Target, and then we'll keep stepping our way on up the ladder there.
Yeah. I had a little moment that reminds me the other day at Walmart. I was buying a Leatherman, and I had two out. There's one for $4.95, and then there was a Gerber for $35. And I remember looking at the shiny cheap one, and I was like, ooh, that costs nothing. And the guy's like, yeah, let me pull it out and take a look at it. And it's almost
falling
apart in my hand. And I had one of those moments where I was a consumer. I was like, man, this one isn't that good. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, should probably go with the nice one, right? And I was like, duh. I was like, yeah. I said that out loud, didn't I? I was like, yep. I was like,
I tell everybody I bought a bicycle years ago from Walmart that I literally had to exchange 5 times before finally just asking for my money back. And then I went to Target and bought one that I still have today. Yeah, and things literally fall apart in your hands. But it's rock bottom prices, and that relates to almost any business, almost 100% of the time, across the board. You almost get what you pay for in that sense. So with that being said, let's quickly just kind of jump back to where do you want to take this industry personally? Do you want to be a manager? Do you want to run a dispensary? Do you want to run a grow? You want to get out of this business? Well, what is your personal exit strategy of being a budtender?
I always parlaying, a job into another job, and I'm pretty well rounded in this industry because I've worked a number of jobs. And I've definitely toyed with the idea of a state going legal, because that's where the money's at, is when a state is just getting going. Because when you're tapped out in, a city that's been pumping out a lot of weed for years and counting, that opportunity starts to dwindle for the buco bucks that happen very quickly. Because there's a difference when your state goes legal to where it's been legal for a couple of years and the novelty wears off a little bit.
So you're talking about investing into a license in a new state and being part of a new operation of a new state.
I would say that's one of the more attractive things as somebody who knows the industry from kind of like an inside perspective, is seeing that opportunity and knowing that as soon as people open up the doors in a place where it's never been available, people are going to keep coming in for sure.
It makes sense. I mean, the new opportunity, first comer, anytime you can enter a market first, there's always the opportunity of making more profit. And I don't know if Colorado is saturated. A little
bit,
se,
but
it may just be restricted of licensing. I think if we change some of the licensing, we may have some different booms of more opportunities, more places opening. Also, once we get more hemp production going in, that kind of stuff. So you want to be an investor or operator, manager? What's kind of the hey, I'm 35 and this is what I've become vision?
Well,
I take it you're not 35 already,
no,
right? Okay. That was a good guess.
Well, you're having Jay on the show, right? Coming up here pretty soon. Yeah, don't air this one for him. No.
No, like I said, nobody listens. What's the desire?
The desire would be to, I could totally see myself managing a dispensary or helping one get off its feet with the basics, because you need to know all the well-rounded aspects, because that's what I really like about Dank. Kind of in closing, is I feel like Dank has a very well-rounded aspect to it. We're not a dispensary that's gonna if we have a problem in the back, we're not gonna let it come out the front door. And I tell you, I've worked for some dispensaries. If they've got problems in the back, they're covering it up and putting it in a bottle and sending it out to you, because it's costly to make mistakes in this industry if you don't have a batch come out right. But there's a lot of them that won't take the time and patience or take the bullet, but that's one really nice thing about Dank, is they stand by their name and their quality, and they're not pulling people's chains, and they're all about the high quality weed and like some of those classic strains, and they got a good thing going here for sure.
Ooh, that's the next interview. We're going to expose some dispensaries and out them on all their poor practices. We're going to sneak up on them with a microphone, tap on their door.
Oh, what we've always talked about. God, of course, I wish when I get the moment and the microphone to tell of all the crazy people we've had walk through the door, they don't come to mind. But we've thought about a little show where you could get a hidden camera and ask budtenders the worst questions and just keep pressing them over and over. Like, hey, I got my little brother outside. He's 18. He loves indicas. What would you suggest for him? And it's like, oh God, could you imagine filming a budtender?
Let's do
reaction?
it. Let's set it up with Jay. Let's get permission, and we'll just keep it just amongst ourselves.
Yeah,
we'll set up a camera, and then we'll get a whole line of clients lined up, and we'll just do a whole day of just nonstop.
Oh, just the worst question.
And then we'll edit it together and put up a nice YouTube video.
Totally. Yeah. Just walk into a dispensary that has 50 strains on display and say, "This is all you've got." And that's one of my favorites. Just
let's do it.
Yeah,
totally do it. I could do stuff like that all day long.
We got hidden cameras. How small we got, man?
What we will do is, you gave me an idea that I do want to do. I want to come back and I want to get segmented recordings of customer stories that I can edit together as just sole individual little segments and stuff, little clips. Yeah. So I do want to come back and have you and some of the others maybe give little customer stories of stuff I can insert into the show.
Oh, yeah.
A little 1 minute, 2 minute, little bit. So
that'd be awesome.
Keep that in mind, and then in the short future, I'll come calling on you to give a little story or two. And then
I'll start collecting them. I'll be prepared this next time.
Well, very good, man. Let's give some contact information for where we're located so people can come and visit you personally, and tell them you heard them right here on the Grind and Burn, and don't ask for a discount. Just tell them you heard them on the show.
Yeah. And then you'll get a discount, promise.
Let them know where we're at.
All right, yeah, we're at 3835 Elm Street, Denver, Colorado, right off of I-70, not too far from Colorado Boulevard in that intersection right there.
And can we find some websites or social media?
Yeah, check it out on, I think it's dank-colorado.com. You can check out our menu, see our strains there. Oh, and a little side note there, like most dispensaries, we list everything that we grow. But if you're looking for something in particular, it never hurts to call us just to see if we have that strain available today, because we just want to tell you what we got, but they go quick sometimes, and that's like most places too.
Excellent, man. Are you still on the clock? Were you on the clock this whole time?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So in a sense, I kind of paid you to be on the show.
Yeah, this was awesome.
So you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for being on the show at the same time.
Definitely.
Hey, I appreciate it. We'll definitely have you come back in the future.
Cool.
Get you involved and try to get your counterparts also involved more in the show, since I've been broadcasting right here for a year. And we're going to have Jay on probably in a couple weeks. We'll have you back. We'll get little stories. I'll have maybe some growers come on. I had Jeremy on, I don't know, 6
nice.
months ago or
Pick
so.
his brain a little bit.
Yeah. Picked it all apart. It's still laying over there in the corner, I think.
Oh, I see. Oh, gosh.
Cool. You have a great weekend.
Cool.
And thank you
as
very
well.
much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
There you go, Cannapreneurs. Thank you for joining me this week. Make sure to come back next week. We'll be talking to even more guests from the industry, from the government, from the entrepreneur world. Make sure to reach out to us on all the social media, Massroots, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and any place else, all under the same name, CannabisCommunityProject.com. We'll see you next week.